Maggie Thompson's blood ran cold as she stared at the towering stack of client files on her desk, a month's worth of urgent tax declarations dumped on her by her boss Daniel Carter with a deadline just weeks away, a sinister move that confirmed her darkest suspicion. After 37 years of loyal service, her colleagues were orchestrating a ruthless plan to force her out of the company she'd given her life to, a betrayal that threatened to erase everything she'd built. At 59, Maggie had been a cornerstone of the company since graduating college, joining as a tax specialist to provide administrative services for busy company presidents, handling clerical work, and excelling in tax-related matters for 45 clients, a workload that had ballooned over the years, even with a part-timer's help. She'd started as a young woman with big dreams, eager to make her mark in a male-dominated field, her sharp mind and tireless work ethic earning her the trust of clients who relied on her to navigate the complex world of tax law, their businesses thriving because of her meticulous care. Over the decades, she'd seen the company grow from a small firm to a regional powerhouse, her role expanding as she took on more clients, her desk a constant flurry of papers, spreadsheets, and late-night calculations, her dedication unwavering even as the years took their toll on her body, her knees aching from long hours, her eyes straining under the fluorescent lights. Maggie took pride in her long-standing client relationships, some spanning over 30 years, their trust a driving force that kept her going, their gratitude, expressed in heartfelt thank-you notes and holiday cards, a reminder of why she'd stayed, even when the challenges mounted, her determination a shield against showing any weakness, a trait she'd learned early in her career when she'd had to prove herself in a world that often dismissed women like her. But the past 3 months had turned her workplace into a battleground, a stark contrast to the camaraderie she'd once known, ever since Dan, 7 years her junior, was promoted to head of the tax department, his once courteous demeanor replaced by a biting condescension that made every interaction a struggle, a shift that left Maggie reeling, her memories of their early days together, when Dan had been a nervous new hire, seeking her advice on tricky tax codes, now a distant echo. Dan's tone was sharp, his complaints relentless, dismissing Maggie's pushback with a curt, "Check the manual, don't do anything unnecessary," his words a constant jab at her expertise, as if her decades of experience meant nothing compared to his newfound authority, his promotion a badge he wore with arrogance, his once respectful nods replaced by sneers that made Maggie's stomach churn. Rachel Brooks, Dan's assistant, piled on, mocking Maggie's efficiency and sneering at her rank-and-file status, oblivious to the fact that Maggie had turned down a promotion to department head years ago, a choice she'd made to stay close to the work she loved, not wanting the administrative burdens of management, a decision she'd kept to herself, not needing the spotlight to feel fulfilled. Rachel's taunt stung, her words laced with a venom that Maggie couldn't understand. "You're slowing us down, Maggie. Maybe it's time to step aside." Her voice dripping with false pity, her eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that made Maggie's skin crawl, the younger woman's ambition a stark contrast to Maggie's quiet dedication. The harassment intensified when Dan accused Maggie of racking up overtime, labeling it a waste, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're costing us too much, 80 hours last month alone," while Rachel sighed dramatically. "Your constant overtime is dragging down the whole tax department's performance, you know." The truth behind Maggie's overtime was far uglier. Dan had dumped a month's worth of client files on her desk, tasks that needed to be filed by the end of the month, some of which were Rachel's responsibilities, a deliberate attempt to overwhelm her and push her to the breaking point, a calculated move that left Maggie breathless with its audacity, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of their cruelty. That evening, as Maggie sat at her desk, her face drained of color, her hands trembling slightly as she sifted through the files, she muttered in disbelief. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right? Some of these are Rachel's clients. How did they end up on my desk?" But Dan was already halfway out the door, his response casual and uncaring. "I'm heading out, take care of that." His smirk a dagger in her chest as he left the office, Rachel trailing behind with a mocking laugh. "Good luck with that, Maggie, you'll need it." Her words a cruel echo in the empty room, the door slamming shut behind them, leaving Maggie alone with the weight of their betrayal. The reality of their plans settled on Maggie like a heavy fog, her sigh deepening as she opened the scattered files, her eyes scanning the familiar names of clients she'd worked with for decades, their businesses now at risk if she couldn't meet these deadlines, the pressure of ice around her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she fought to keep her composure. She realized their goal. They wanted her to retire, her extensive knowledge in taxation a threat to Dan, who was unapproachable, his gruff demeanor and off-putting presence making him unpopular with everyone except Rachel, who clung to him for strategic reasons, likely to gain favor with the man evaluating the department's performance. Her loyalty to Dan a calculated move to secure her own position. Her ambition a stark contrast to Maggie's selflessness. Maggie's expertise made her the go-to for other team members, a fact that clearly irritated Dan, his shallow motives chilling her to the bone as she faced the daunting workload, knowing that claiming overtime would only invite more criticism, forcing her to work unpaid extra hours to keep up. Her resolve the only thing keeping her from crumbling under their calculated pressure. Her mind racing with the question of how much more she could take before they succeeded in breaking her, her heart heavy with the fear that her loyalty to the company might cost her everything she'd worked for, her future hanging in the balance as she braced herself for the fight ahead. Maggie Thompson's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped into the president's office, the air thick with tension, the smug grins on Daniel Carter and Rachel Brooks's faces a cruel prelude to the bombshell Charles Harrison dropped. "Maggie, we need you to resign by the end of this month," a demand that felt like a betrayal of her 37 years of dedication. A stark confirmation that her colleagues' ruthless plan to push her out had reached its peak, leaving her to fight for her dignity in a room full of judgment. The company had undergone a leadership change just months ago, with Chuck, the son of the former president Edward Harrison, taking over after Edward's sudden illness, a transition that left Chuck unfamiliar with the company's inner workings, his inexperience a vulnerability Dan and Rachel had clearly exploited. Maggie had been summoned to the office without warning, her mind already weighed down by the relentless harassment she'd endured for months, Dan's sharp accusations and Rachel's mocking taunts a constant assault on her spirit, their latest attack centered on her overtime hours. 80 hours last month compared to their supposed 0, a number they'd inflated by dumping their own work on her, a fact she couldn't reveal without risking her reputation. Chuck's voice was firm, his eyes avoiding hers as he spoke. "Dan and Rachel say you've been overbilling for overtime, Maggie. 80 hours while others are at 15. We can't keep someone working at such a slow pace." Maggie's stomach churned, her hands clenching into fists at her sides, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I haven't overbilled. I've been struggling to finish my workload within regular hours because of the extra tasks assigned to me." She glanced at Dan, his smirk unwavering, his arms crossed as if he'd already won, while Rachel leaned forward, her voice dripping with false concern. "It's not just the overtime, Maggie. You're dragging the whole department down. We've had to pick up your slack." The lie stung, a sharp reminder of the files they dumped on her, the late nights she'd spent working unpaid hours to meet deadlines, her body aching from the strain, her mind racing with the unfairness of it all. But she knew revealing Dan's instructions would make her look incompetent, a risk she couldn't take in front of Chuck, who seemed to be eating up their accusations. Chuck sighed deeply, his brow furrowed. "There's no evidence to pursue this further, Maggie, but we can't keep you if you're this slow. I'm sorry, but resignation is the best option." Maggie felt a deep weariness settle into her bones, her dedication unappreciated, the additional workload from Dan and Rachel dismissed as her own failure, the weight of 37 years of service reduced to a single, cold demand, her mind flashing back to the early days when she joined the company, a young woman full of hope, working late nights to prove herself, earning the trust of clients who still called her their tax whisperer, a nickname that once made her smile but now felt like a cruel irony. She thought of the countless times she'd stayed late to help a struggling colleague, the holiday cards from clients that lined her desk, the quiet pride she'd felt knowing she'd helped build the company into what it was, all of it now overshadowed by Dan and Rachel's calculated betrayal, their ambition a stark contrast to her loyalty, their lies a weapon she hadn't seen coming. "I understand," Maggie said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, her agreement a bitter pill as she acknowledged her earlier hint at resignation, her heart breaking as she realized she had no choice but to walk away from the life she'd built, the clients she'd nurtured, the legacy she'd hoped to leave behind. As she turned to leave, Rachel's voice cut through the silence, her tone laced with venom. "Thanks for quitting, Maggie. It's about time," her sneer a dagger in Maggie's chest, while Dan added, his voice smug. "Good, we're cutting labor costs, especially for people exploiting overtime like you." Maggie met their disdain with a silent, steady gaze, her eyes burning with unshed tears, her mind racing with the injustice of it all, their smug satisfaction a bitter reminder of how little they valued her, how easily they discarded her after all she'd given. She left the office, her steps heavy, her heart a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, grief, each one battling for dominance as she returned to her desk, the familiar space now a battlefield of memories. her chair creaking under her weight as she sat down, her hands trembling as she began the handover process, determined to leave with her professionalism intact, even if her spirit was shattered. Over the next few days, Maggie poured herself into creating detailed documents for her 45 clients, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she outlined every tax strategy, every deadline, every quirk of their accounts, her notes a testament to the care she'd always given, a final act of loyalty to the clients who'd trusted her for decades. She scheduled appointments with those she could meet personally, her voice steady as she explained her departure, their shocked expressions and heartfelt thanks a small comfort against the pain. Their words, "You've been our rock, Maggie, we'll miss you," a reminder of what she was losing. Unable to meet Chuck, she sent letters to inform clients of her successor, her handwriting neat despite the tremor in her hands, her professionalism unwavering even as her heart broke with every word, her mind haunted by the question of what she'd do next, her future a blank slate after 37 years of certainty. A week after her resignation, as she sat at home, finally enjoying a moment of peace, a cup of tea warming her hands, her phone began to ring incessantly. Calls from the company, Dan, and Rachel's personal numbers flooding in, her social insurance procedures already complete, making her hesitant to answer, her mind flashing back to the sneers, the accusations, the cold demand to resign. But the persistent ringing forced her hand, her curiosity outweighing her reluctance, and when she picked up, Chuck's voice was urgent, a note of panic she'd never heard before. "Who exactly are you, Maggie?" She couldn't help but scoff, her tone mocking. "Just an unemployed lady who resigned from your company. Nothing else." Chuck's voice turned frantic. "There's chaos since you left. 49 calls to stop transactions with us, not just from your clients but from prospective companies too. Please, come back immediately." Maggie's breath caught, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and anticipation, her mind racing with questions. What had happened in her absence? Had her departure finally revealed her true value? And what would she find when she returned to the company that had cast her aside so easily, her resolve hardening as she rose from her chair, ready to face the storm that awaited her, her future hanging in the balance once more? Maggie Thompson's pulse quickened as she walked back into the company she'd left behind, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Daniel Carter and Rachel Brooks waiting for her, their faces pale, dark circles under their eyes, a stark contrast to the smug grins they'd worn just a week ago, a clear sign that her resignation had unleashed a storm they couldn't weather, setting the stage for a reckoning that would finally bring justice after months of their betrayal. The office buzzed with tension, the familiar hum of phones and chatter now a chaotic symphony of panic, employees whispering as Maggie passed, their eyes wide with curiosity, the air thick with the fallout of her departure. Dan glared at her, his voice sharp, his usual arrogance tinged with desperation. "Since you left, we've been bombarded with calls to stop transactions, not just from your clients, but from prospective companies we were planning to introduce." "What did you do, Maggie?" Rachel echoed his suspicion, her tone accusatory. "Did you sabotage us? How could you stoop so low?" Their haggard appearance told Maggie the toll of handling cancellations had been heavy, their once polished exteriors now frayed, Dan's tie askew, Rachel's hair unkempt, their exhaustion a testament to the chaos they'd been left to manage, a chaos Maggie hadn't caused but had clearly exposed. She stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. "I didn't sabotage anything. Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are cheaper tax accountant firms out there. They stayed with us because of me. I offered tailored tax-saving strategies they trusted, strategies that kept them loyal for decades." Dan snapped, his face reddening. "You're overvaluing yourself, Maggie. You're not that important," while Rachel taunted, her voice dripping with disdain. "You really think you're the reason they stayed? That's pathetic." But Chuck Harrison, the president, who'd been listening from his office doorway, sighed deeply, his expression serious as he stepped forward. "Actually, I got a call from my father, Edward, the former president. Some clients who stopped transactions went to him to negotiate on Maggie's behalf." Maggie's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She hadn't expected that, the loyalty of her clients a shock even to her, her mind flashing back to the countless late nights she'd spent crafting those tax strategies, the phone calls where clients thanked her for saving their businesses, the trust she'd built over 37 years now coming to her defense in a way she'd never imagined. Chuck continued, his voice heavy with regret. "Dad said the tax department thrived because of you, Maggie. You managed your 45 clients efficiently and supported your colleagues' clients with knowledge even Dan couldn't match. He also said if you hadn't declined the promotion years ago, you'd be higher than a department head by now. Maybe even my role. Rachel's jaw dropped, her eyes darting to Maggie, the realization dawning that Maggie could have been her boss. Her earlier taunts now a bitter irony, while Dan's face twisted with anger, his voice rising. Why her over me? I'm the head of the department. Rachel chimed in, her tone desperate. Dan's a great leader. Why choose her? She's just a rank-and-file worker. Chuck's expression turned stern, his gaze shifting to Dan and Rachel. Since Maggie left, we've had complaints about you two shifting your workload onto others, including Maggie. Dan, you pushed client declaration forms onto subordinates, even Rachel's work, while accusing Maggie of being a salary thief. Dan's face paled, his hands clenching into fists, while Chuck added, we also found receipts from the accounting department, dining expenses filed by Dan, tied to your affair. Dan stammered, his voice shaking. I was mentoring her, she needed guidance. But Rachel turned ghostly pale, her eyes wide with fear, as Chuck accused them of neglecting duties, inflating expenses, and violating company policy with their office romance, both being married, their actions a betrayal of the company's trust. You're both fired, effective immediately, Chuck declared, his voice firm, his decision final, the room falling silent except for the sound of Dan's ragged breathing, his world crumbling around him. Dan pleaded, his voice breaking. I have a family. Please don't do this. While Rachel begged, her eyes brimming with tears. I'll apologize to everyone. I can't lose this job. My reputation will be ruined. Maggie spoke up, her tone calm but unyielding. Stop resisting, it's undignified. Dan, you got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Take responsibility and reflect on what you've done. Dan glared at her, his voice a snarl. What would a single person like you understand? You've got no one to lose. But Maggie sighed, her eyes steady. I understand consequences, Dan, something you never did. She turned to Chuck, a faint smile on her lips. Should I share more about their misdeeds? Dan and Rachel panicked, their voices overlapping in a desperate plea. No, please, don't. But Maggie revealed. Dan faked business trips to spend days with Rachel, and they harassed employees into quitting, assigning sudden tasks with tight deadlines, targeting anyone they didn't like. Chuck, furious, cut their final salaries, vowing to investigate past expense claims, his anger palpable as he ordered them to leave, security escorting them out as Dan's pleas echoed down the hall. Don't cut my salary. I'll lose everything. The fallout was swift. Dan's affair led to his divorce, both he and Rachel facing compensation claims, their reputations ruined in the tax industry, the close-knit community spreading word of their misdeeds, leaving them struggling to find work, eventually resorting to day labor at construction sites, a far cry from their cushy office roles. Rachel called Maggie in tears, her voice trembling. I only wanted a better life. I never liked Dan, I swear. But Maggie replied, her tone firm. You can't unring a bell, Rachel. Face the consequences of your choices. Chuck turned to Maggie, his expression earnest. Maggie, I'm so sorry for making you resign. I didn't know your value. Will you revoke your resignation? Dad says you're indispensable. Maggie hesitated, her heart torn. The offer tempting but the wounds still fresh, her mind replaying the betrayal, the late nights, the unfair accusations, the moment she'd been forced to walk away from the life she'd built. She shook her head, her voice soft but resolute. Thank you, Chuck, but I can't come back. I was told to resign, and I've made peace with that. I need a fresh start. Instead, she chose to assist at a friend's tax office, supplementing her income while enjoying a more relaxed lifestyle, the slower pace a balm to her weary soul, her days now filled with meaningful work and the freedom to set her own hours, her clients following her with unwavering loyalty, their trust a reminder of her worth. Looking ahead, Maggie dreamed of starting her own firm, a place where she could serve clients on equal footing, free from corporate bureaucracy, her vision clear. She'd be a tax accountant who treated her clients as partners, not subordinates, her second life a chance to pursue what truly mattered, her heart light with the lesson that integrity and hard work outlast deceit, her future bright with new possibilities. A perfect ending to a painful chapter. Her journey a testament to the power of resilience, and the beauty of a fresh start.